¿Quién iba a imaginar que el camino que un día iniciaste finalizaría abruptamente? ¿Quién iba a pensar que la salida a tu encrucijada sería cruzar el puente que jamás pensaste que podrías cruzar? La transformación solo ocurre en lugares incómodos, así que con valentía sigue caminando un pie enfrente del otro. Acuérdate que si no creces, te encoges. Yo soy Marta Ro, bienvenido de vuelta a la incomodidad. Échale. Muy bienvenidos sean al segundo episodio con Kristy Petty. Ya la introduje en el primero. Si no lo has visto, ve a verlo ya. Hi, Krista.
Hi.
So are you ready for our second? We can act like it's a different day. Remember when you used to do that in the theater? Where you're like, pretend it's a different day. Just turn around. But it's the same day. We're wearing the
new
same.
Day.
But we could be.
New day, new moment.
Good thing we can talk all day long. Okay. So, unlearning. So, I am in a personal journey, obviously, because I didn't want to be the cliche that would be affected by her 40th birthday, but I am, and it's okay. I've just kind of been like, just do it. And I've been thinking a lot about identity because I think when we reach certain milestones, there's a question of like, who should I be more of, less of in myself? I think identity for many people, including myself, has had different moments. There's moments where it felt very functional, like this is who I am. And as I get older, I have a relationship to it where I think that knowing who I am is not something I respect that much anymore. Like I don't want to know rigidly who I am, you know? And I think when we build identity, which has a purpose, and I would love for you to speak on that, why we create identity, it feels very functional, and then it starts being more of a block when I really believe and like stand by who I am, I think. So obviously I want to talk about identity, but the value of unlearning who you think you are to evolve.
To evolve.
To new places. So why do we create identity? Why does human being need identity?
Well, first I would like to say we're born into it. We're born into identity and identifiers. And oftentimes I don't even know that we know what identities we've been born into until we start to experience a level of disidentification, or it doesn't seem to quite fit, or we feel the limitation of it, or something else becomes valued or prioritized or important to us that feels incongruent or in conflict with it. And I think identity is important for us to build a framework or a structure to grow in, learn in. It allows for us to understand each other to some degree, or we can use it to kind of move through things more maybe rapidly when we can recognize certain identities, value certain identities. But I think one of the things that's fascinating to me is the value and importance of framework in general at the level of understanding. So we value understanding greatly. We value interpretations, whether we're aware of what those interpretations are or not, greatly. And we create those based on what we value. So if I value a particular family image around power is with males, and I value that, then I identify power in the family with continuing the lineage of males. And then if we hold that, and that was passed down to us, and we subscribe to that, and we continue that, then when there are females born into the family, or we even marry, if we were to choose to marry or integrate females into our family, there isn't even a consideration that that's where power is. They serve a different purpose. And so we value something, we create identity around it, and then it holds the value or the power. And then other things have different value or different pieces or identities. I think what's crazy about that is how we try to create identity around things that aren't tangible or identifiable, like power.
Yeah. For some reason, that was the word that resonated the most.
Because we try to create identity around power, and power isn't necessarily identifiable in the way that we attempt to create identity around it. And identity creates construct and limitation, and power at some level is limitless. It's not seen necessarily until it's demonstrated, but I don't want to go down that road too much. I noticed myself going, okay, let's keep this fairly straightforward without me getting too. So I could say, forget everything I just said. No, just kidding. What do I want to say about that? Keeping it simple.
When you say
identity, go ahead.
When you say you were born into it, first I heard social, and then obviously
familial, gender.
But it's still very here. I was going to go my own crazy way, which is like, did our soul choose, because do believe. Let's keep it
simple.
Let's keep it simple. I know, but like for me, one of my big identities, I do think is like there's no explanation why from the minute I was born, I'm just so risk taker.
What if that's an identity?
It is.
And what if you were born into that and your family reinforced it and it wasn't necessarily who you are?
But nobody
it's just a way that you identify.
But it scared everyone. Like my mom didn't get why I was so,
But then the experience was fear, and we needed to identify what was causing the fear. And so we build an identity around what's causing the fear. And let's just say I'm experiencing fear. It's uncomfortable, and I need to identify the source of it. So I'm going to call Marta a risk taker from birth.
Or like very unattached. That's another one I've heard my whole life. Like you were just like, literally, they say it in Spanish, alma de me mando sola. Like
okay, we're just going to go here because we might as well just go here. Were you breastfed?
I don't know.
Were you
probably
C-section?
Yes.
Now we can start to talk about psychosomatic aspects of how we come into this human experience. But that's not what we're talking about. But we create identities to explain things without looking at other sources as to what might actually explain that.
I get it.
So you say it's inexplicable. And from the study that I do, I would say there might be some things that might provide some information
of why you didn't like your mom that much.
Why there might not have been a solid, healthy bonding or attachment from the get-go.
Yeah.
And because of that, you've now identified as unattached, risk taker, and you struggle with relationship.
Yeah.
And now because you identify with those things, anything that comes into your life that challenges that, at some level you're going to need to choose if you're not willing to let go of your identity around that.
Which is
and these are fundamental.
Which is why I want to do this about unlearning, because I do realize that
then we're right on topic.
Yeah.
Because are you willing to use yourself?
Yeah, you know me.
I know you. You're so amazing this way. No.
I'm so unattached.
No.
I'm kidding.
What's so interesting about that is I do not experience you as unattached.
I feel like the most unattached person, like fearful of attachment, maybe is not unattached.
Will you say that again?
Yes, fearful of attachment is not unattached.
Yeah. And even the idea that attachment is highly uncomfortable.
Yeah. Attachment.
Yeah.
Yes.
In your system.
Totally.
So even though it could be a healthy part of your development, and certainly would have probably been easier when you were an infant, but now you're attempting to rebuild that as an adult.
Which is craziness.
It is. But it is what it is.
It is what it is.
And so here we are.
Yeah.
And just even the idea that, oh, maybe I'm fearful of attachment versus identifying as unattached.
Yeah.
Or, I'm highly unattached.
Yeah.
Because when you identify as highly unattached, then what do you live in order to make that true?
Everything that means being unattached from relationship.
Yeah.
Which is like workaholic or anything that supports that belief.
Yeah. And then anything that comes into your life that might challenge that identity or require you to let go of that. Threatening, dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is where, if you're willing, that you've known this or identified with this, things in your life as you come into your 40th year, you've had these experiences that have kind of challenged that, and you've either stayed in them or you've removed yourself from it to maintain the identity of I'm highly unattached. And now you're maybe starting to go, maybe you have some things in your life that you're willing to question that or explore something different and realize, that might require me to unlearn some things I've had since my early days or hours, or even in vitro.
Yeah.
Or even in the transition in which I came into this human experience. Yeah.
I like that you say that because I don't make everybody believe that, but I do subscribe to there are choices that even where we were born were made before.
Yeah. I don't force anyone to subscribe to that also, but I do also subscribe to the idea or the notion. I like to imagine.
Me too. I think that's what healed my relationship with my mom. And I think that the belief, not that I don't know if it's true. I can't be affirmative that it's true, but the moment
what it allowed you to experience in relationship.
Totally. What it allowed me to play with is if I chose this woman as my mother, then she is the perfect one. And I can live this life fighting through that or just learning from the perfectness of this relationship. And when I bring that to every aspect of my life, it just makes it lighter. It doesn't make it easier because I'm still a human and I'm still living through things, but it just makes it lighter. The reason why I like a relationship to something bigger than me is because it just brought a lighter sense of my journey.
Yeah, like I'm not alone. Beautifully said.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful way to articulate something that you experienced in your own unlearning. Like, I'm willing to play with the notion or the idea that it's not what I always thought it was. That maybe there's something different, and I would like to play with it. And the reason I want to play with it is because the way that I have believed that it is and held it to be true, I like to say true with a capital T, right? Yeah. I've held it to be true, right? The amount of discomfort or pain or suffering that maybe it's not necessary. Maybe you don't need to carry that into your 40s. Maybe you could find new ways, new possibilities. And then are there other places where you have identified a particular way or held yourself in a particular identity that you would like to explore and play with because maybe it's creating unnecessary suffering? Or maybe it's impeding your ability to experience things that you really long to experience, like new relationship or intimacy or freedom or a sense of self.
I've started seeing now that I'm slowly getting older that there's like two ways to getting older. You either grab onto what you think is true way harder, or you start releasing and becoming more welcoming to other ideas. Like,
Can I just take that and go with it for a minute?
yes.
Do you know where I see that show up?
Where?
One of the things that I do in life is I'm a death doula. So I'm with people by choice as they transition.
That's awesome.
And I find that what you're describing right there reinforces their dying experience. If they are contracted and hanging on to and feeling like they've got to contract in life, they tend to be more contracted, controlled, collapsed in death. If in life they've explored ways to release or open or set down or, relax into, trust in the unfolding of, meet the unknown versus contracting in the known, then that shows up in their dying process and in their death.
Probably even in what they think of, like they're reflecting upon their lives, right?
And who they are and how they move in and through life is reflected in who they are and how they move in and through dying and death. And the dying process different than death, right? But yes, very much I see that reflected. And I think there might be more than two, but those two definitely I think are revealed. And so I do think there's something to that. That what we're choosing now and how we choose to navigate life. My mother was a great example. My mother never believed in God until she entered her dying process. And then all of a sudden, she's questioning, wondering, asking, curious, because as it drew closer and she began to be aware that it's coming, maybe sooner than she thought it would, she really wanted to know, what if I missed this? What if I didn't? And there was fear, and it was driven by fear. That what if she was going to be shut out of this idea or notion of heaven, if that's what it is? And in order to be able to go there, I needed to believe in something, and maybe I should cram for it in these final days. So then my sister and I, because we like humor and those kinds of things, we would leave her hospital room and we would drive along and we would be like, all right, anything happens, let's pray to every God, every entity, everything there possibly could be, just in case one of them is the one. We'll hit them all. Which I think is, I'm not attached to or identifying with one particular way, path, right? Yeah. I'm going to expand out and open, which I think is just another version of it. Like I just swung the pendulum way over to the other side.
But what's really awesome about, as I hear you, I think releasing identity can also be the other way around. I think for so long, growing up, I was so against religion, and I was so this sucks, being Catholic is stupid and blah, blah, blah. And as I've gotten older, I've loved not just finding my spiritual world, but the fact that now I want to make the word God cool again, because
for you.
Yeah, for me, because I want to make it cool in the sense that I'm I've found a new way to identify to it. Like to me, God and universe, even though it's the same thing, it's not the same thing. For me, universe is the energy, the metaphysical, the everything around us. And God is the unconditional love of that construct.
What I love about that is that what I see is when you say that is before God existed outside of you based on what others told you God is. And then on the journey, you were like, you know what?
I'm going to make it my own.
I'm going to make it my own.
Yeah.
I'm going to have my own relationship with God. And if this really is just kind of how I'm constructing it, if that's what this all is anyway, let me construct an identity of God that actually works for me, which is also a way for identity to be healthy, is let me construct an identity with this entity. And I think that's where we tend to want to create identity.
Yeah.
Is around entities that are inexplicable, incomprehensible, beyond our comprehension. We want to try to understand it. We want to try to grab a hold of something. We want to be able to control it, and we want to make it known. So what oftentimes I say is I understand all of the reasons why we would do that. And how can we do that while also exploring having a healthy relationship with the unknown, having a healthy relationship with the inexplicable, the incomprehensible, because there's a lot of incredible freedom and possibility in that too.
Yeah. If we bring it back into the human realm, I think that part of what is hard to let go of identity is the social piece of it. Because if I move my identity, then maybe you won't accept of me, or I also moved my identity for other people, and that discomfort is something that I'm not willing to live through.
Yeah, and I think we're in it right now. Like we're seeing a lot of examples and demonstrations of generations and groups feeling like they're done having other people tell them what they are or what they aren't, or how they are or how they aren't.
Because you're a boomer.
Cramming it down the throat.
And you're a millennial.
Right, or whatever it is.
Or,
and we have all these things. And it's not like that's not useful.
Yeah.
It can be useful. It's you're a millennial and therefore you are ... I think that's where we get in a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. And that's what most of us are like, you can call me a millennial because it's about the time frame in which I was born. Just don't make up a bunch of shit about me. Mm-hmm. Just don't decide a bunch of things about me because I was born during those years. Because I think there's greater sense of self and freedom and expression right now. And it's threatening to the constructs. Mm-hmm. It's threatening to the social constructs. And by the way, I'm just going to say it, social illusions. Mm-hmm. And those who are pretty invested in the social constructs and the social illusions in the press, they're getting tighter. They're going to crank down on it tighter, right? And we're kind of in it right now. We're kind of in this uprising of social tensions and explorations. But historically, you know what happens? It surges and then it goes away for a while. And then it surges and then it goes away for a while.
And we're even seeing this. Powerful.
Well, I think one of the things about this surge is that there are multiple social constructs and illusions that are being challenged greatly. And there's a greater sense of having a voice.
For sure.
Even if my voice is one where I'm never identified or you don't even know who I am, I can just throw it out there. I have all kinds of, exploration and curiosities about that too, about having platforms for people to be able to freely express. Yeah. And then how that adds to and changes the dynamic. But we're still seeing surges and, an increase and a decrease and an increase and a decrease.
So polarized. Everything is so...
It can be.
Yeah.
Or the way I watch people wield masculine and feminine. That's, because I've studied that for so many years. Like sometimes I watch people take that and run with it without any real understanding or education around it. Just like anything else though. But I just kind of go, that's a one way to look at that. And maybe we want to just kind of consider more possibilities, more greater interpretation, more of an integration of multifaceted, multidimensional, multi-layered.
I think as I am listening to you, that's the biggest challenge right now. Like, how do you keep your perspective? Like, how do you honor what you believe without...
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Or how do we?
That's all it is a belief. Doesn't mean it's right or true with a capital T.
No, I don't think it's right or true with a capital T, but you want to keep conversation open. So how...
Well, I think that's what we do. Like to be in discourse is to be willing to put my belief out there and allow it to be challenged. I think it's in those places in conversations and discourse where we can all be challenged in what we've known or believed with the intention or opportunity to learn more or to expand it or to hear it with different dimensions or different possibility. Yeah. Versus what I call fundamentalism. Right? So a social construct and a social illusion backed by or grounded in fundamentalism is a restricted and basically we go down to the fundamental and we hang on to that and we're not willing to release any of that. And if I'm not willing to release it and I hold it in a closed fist, there's not a whole lot that can go through that. Yeah. Closed fist metaphorically. Closed fist like closed mind. There's not a lot that can move through that.
Yeah.
And so
You want to hold it
if
loosely.
I'm insistent on that, we want to hold it loosely.
Yeah.
Because the challenge in that, though, is that if I hold it loosely, then somehow I have been taught that means I'm letting go of my identity. And if I've been hanging on to this identity as a way to show who I am versus who you've told me I am, I'm going to hang on pretty tight. You're seeing generations right now doing that. They're hanging on to identity or identities. This is just in my interpretation and my seed, my point of view. That's all it is. They're hanging on so tightly because they're so tired of the external world telling them what they are, what they aren't, or what they should feel, or what they should be, or what that they're not even sure where they need to be open or closed, or they're just going to hang on tightly because it's the only place they've felt any kind of sovereignty or sense of self or personal authority or, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I think most of us have, I'm just going to make a blanket statement, most of us have an immature relationship with authority anyway. And so we try to develop our own personal authority. And part of that process is during our teen years, we naturally, developmentally, we're going to resist the external authority to some degree.
Isn't where you build most of your initial identity, teen?
Social identity.
Social identity. Yeah.
Yeah. And so part of that process and if you look at it from human development is, we naturally want our teens to begin to create some level of independence and autonomy, finding a sense of self. But during that developmental phase, the primary way that we do that is by what we stand against, what we resist, what we want you to stop telling me. I want to find my own way. The challenge, though, is that if it stays that way as we get older, and that never moves to the next level of development, now it's all about what I stand against. So my identity, quote unquote, self-sovereignty, quote unquote, authority is driven by what I'm standing against versus what I stand in, what I stand for, that kind of thing. And so I think we have a lot of us who've struggled in that stage of development.
Yeah.
Where we're kind of stuck in more of that adolescent sense of authority, adolescent sense of sovereignty, and we never really have the opportunity or are supported in, maturing that to more of a adult high functioning.
I've always
sense
thought of
authority.
my personal process of looking at governing myself or self-leadership as first is autonomy, which is I can, and then it's independence, which is I am, and then that I choose, which is more responsibility. If I can look at things like I choose.
And I choose literally opens us up beyond identity. Because if I have the power to choose, then I don't need to identify with and defend. I can actually explore more of an integration of the choices I make in order to live into more of an integrated versus identified experience.
What is the biggest identity shift you felt in yourself or something you were holding on to? Maybe it was athletics?
No, it's most recent.
Oh, really?
I was a trainer in transformational trainings for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I'm not that anymore. Not in the same way, in the same manner, and delivering in the same way. That was a constant companion for me for 30 years. And it was a place that I actually identified. I didn't even realize how much I identified with
until
it.
You got out.
Until I was out of it. I didn't realize how it infiltrated every aspect of my life until I stepped out of that as role and responsibility. But I also am starting to realize what went with me that I didn't even identify. It wasn't like it was identified because it was so integrated. So there's the healthy and the unhealthy. There's the healthy that has come with me that is so a part of who I am and it's integrated that I still can identify with to some degree. But there's also the unhealthy that I thought lived in that role, that seat, that position, that relationship with human being, people, population, profession, how I'm seen, my relevance, my reputation, my integrity.
And what's the journey been like?
Painful at times. There's deep grief. I didn't realize that I would grieve this as much, but I think that's what happens when some of those deep identities begin to dissolve. What I'm coming to learn in my own process is that would be a healthy form of releasing that relationship, and that identity would be to grieve it, to allow it for me to grieve it and allow it to dissolve and move and transform, right? And so it's not like it's not with me still to some degree. It's just taking new shape. It's different, but there's been a lot of grief and facing some of my own, feeling irrelevant, feeling like, will I ever make that level of impact ever again in my life? Like, have I basically said goodbye to the most impactful career or sacred livelihood I've ever had?
Yeah.
Or at least the manner in which I could create that impact, the vehicle, the mechanism in which I could create that impact. Will I ever have another one like it? So it's been, and I'm still in it, but I feel like I'm starting to, integrate and come out of it. But what people think of me, do they still respect me? Do they still value me? Do they, like, literally, that's how like the unhealthy aspect of identity is like, that's who I am. And so without it, will people still love me? Will they still respect me? Will they still want to be in relationship with me? Was that all I was for people? Mm-hmm. And if that's gone, then I have no relevance or value. That's a pretty good indicator of maybe the unhealthy aspects that came as a part of me identifying as that role.
Yeah.
And or that position.
That also makes me think of something else that I think is powerful is in the winning in life.
Yeah.
How attached we are to those aspects of who we are.
Yeah.
How the aspects of the winning can sometimes shadow or cover up many aspects that are also bubbling up and important to look at.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
winning, success, achievement, accomplishment, all of those things.
I think for people who have had success, it's easy to think they're winning and then fall maybe into moments where that winning seems more of a loss. I've definitely felt that in the last few years. For
me to continue winning at that level, I'm starting to experience greater losses. Yeah.
And even loss of who I am.
In the game of life, yeah.
Who I truly am here to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
In the unlearning, that's where my unlearning now is focused on. How much power I've given to the winning.
Wow.
And obviously everything you said, right? I relate to all of it. Is this why I'm worth something? Is this the only thing I'm good at?
Yeah.
Like, if I stop doing this, what else am I good at?
Well, it's interesting too, because there were 3 areas of my life that I was experiencing that all at once. I let go of that position and part of my career. Mm-hmm. I let go of my marriage, and I let go of, as a parent, empty nest, kids moved out of the house, and now that's shifting and changing my relationship. So it was like the trifecta of
who
identity. Like, literally in the middle of the night, waking up going, where do I look?
Yeah.
Which is the indicator right there. Continuing to look outside of myself and what I do as an indicator of my value or who I am. And yes, there is that. Like, if we go back to what we talked about earlier about end results and important to create things and have results and do things that feel of value, but
do things.
The doing when it overrides, or the doing or the having.
Yeah.
As an indicator of
which I totally identify
value
with the
or
doing,
worth versus
Not that the having it doesn't play, but every time I challenge myself in identity, I realize that I'm falling into a new doingness.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because what I went back to is even in my 30-year career, every 5 years, I would stop and I would challenge everything that I was teaching to see if I still believed it.
Which I think is good, no?
Yeah,
It's
I thought
healthy.
so. It worked for me.
Yeah.
But then I'm in this whole, here it is again, of, oh, well, if I'm not that and I'm not that, I'm not that. And those, if I wasn't it there, then I could overcompensate over here. Well, if I wasn't it in my career, then I could go over here and be a really good mom and a really good wife. But then if, all of those, what's left?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it really is who I am and how I live every single day and what I bring to this life through that. Like, can I make a difference and never set foot in a training room ever again? Yes, I can. And I do. So, and just reminding myself, because I think that's really part of the whole journey. If we talk about the journey, there's the remembering and forgetting and remembering and forgetting and remembering and forgetting and remembering and forgetting.
Yeah. In your identity as a coach, last question. I know for me, I've always felt you know how people look at us.
Oh, yes.
Right?
I think it's more of how people identify me as a coach, but yes, I'll go with it.
That's exactly
how
what I
I'm
want.
identified as a coach.
But that's exactly where I'm going, because it's so funny. It's always been funny, and I don't mean funny like I want to disrespect anyone, but I know what I feel inside. And I know that I have a talent for doing this or whatever, but I have never identified with what people see outside. I don't know how to explain this. Like, it feels, I feel flawed. I've always been comfortable with my humanness. And even though in the way we were trained up, it feels very like we're special, I've never felt special. It feels just like, this is my I found like I'm good at this. That's good. But I feel my humanness. I feel my flawedness. I feel my lack of. I feel my insecurity. I feel my everything. So it's always been very interesting, because I also know places where I wish people would look at me how they look at me as a coach. So that's really interesting, like where I feel less than. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is when you get so much outside feedback, that is not that it's not a part of you or something that you are creating, but inside you still feel like a human being.
I say, I was like, yeah, don't put me on the pedestal. I put my pants on one leg at a time too. Like, I take a shit and it's just like you do. Like, I have BO and I do the things and I get weird in my mind and I have insecurities and
Totally.
But what I also realize is that we identify with things a particular way, so we don't have to feel the discomfort of that. So it gets uncomfortable for people. That's the tricky part, is they need to identify with me in a particular way so they can feel better.
Oh.
They need to see me as a guru or a shaman or a healer or a this, so they can feel better about, or more taken care of, or secure or safe, or it's the real deal, or whatever that is. And to some degree, I let that be okay.
Yeah, me too.
But I also very often want to level set that.
But what's your relationship towards them seeing also your humanness? Because I
totally want them to see my humanness. Mm-hmm. I think it's important, but it's also awkward. Mm-hmm. It can be awkward and uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. There are times when people are showering me with praise and I'm like, this is so uncomfortable. And even though I know that what they're saying is at some level, they're recognizing, yes, I've spent a lot of time here. I've invested. I've built skill set. I have tools. I do have a level of mastery here. I will own that. Mm-hmm. And I celebrate it. But I think it's when it gets really uncomfortable is, why are we doing that? Why do we feel the need to tell me or the coach those things?
Yeah.
And I really do believe we do identify with certain things to support us in finding our way or feeling safer or more stable or more okay to continue to do the work or continue to be wild or weird or different or find our own way.
Did you ever have a moment where you were like, I can't fuck up? Like, people look at me a certain way.
Do you
like,
remember me saying something about perfectionism and free throws?
Yes. No, but I mean, as a coach, you know, when you're like, oh, people look at me.
Well, I certainly didn't just completely dissolve perfectionism.
Yeah.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
That piece that I identified with perfectionism as the way you needed to be if you were going to be a leader or if you were going to be visible or if you were going to excel or if you were going to achieve high levels of accomplishment.
Yeah.
One needed to be perfect.
Yeah.
And so, when I went into this whole adventure called coaching, I certainly bumped up against on occasion. I took some real trips around the block with my perfectionism and got to, find ways to recognize it, not make it wrong, and integrate it in. And you'll never guess the kind of people I actually had as clients early on in my career. What do you think? What characteristic do you think showed up a lot?
Like
in
type A, super
perfectionist.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I love that when the universe is like
I'm
so
really,
aligned to who you
I'm gonna
are.
look in the mirror every single day, 10 times a day. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty amazing proving ground.
Yeah, for sure. I'm amazed that I don't get any more clients that like don't believe in anything. You know?
You don't get this anymore?
No.
Is that a sign of progress?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
It's a sign of progress.
I don't get perfectionism as much anymore. Every once in a while.
Any last thoughts on learning?
I mean, there's so much that we could say about these things and these topics. Like, they're so vast and they're so deep and multi-layered. And I always feel like we just kind of do just one little snapshot of or one little piece. And I just trust that whatever we do share and talk about here, if it can even support one listener or one person to be recognized, be seen, could take one thing from this to maybe look at it a little differently. Or like you said, play with things in life that maybe we identify with or have been identified as in a way that's maybe more on the unhealthy side. Because not all unhealthy, just where it becomes unhealthy. Then I think it was valuable time spent. And I would trust that would be available for people.
I was just thinking, like, what's your sign? Right? Like, that's sort of...
Well, I call it typology.
Yeah.
I'm a 3.
Yeah.
Sagittarius.
Yeah.
A human design is.
Yeah.
And therefore I am. And what it's like to be in a relationship with me is. Yeah. And the way I'll be when I'm 80 is. So just deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
not a big subscriber to all that. Like when people say, like, I'm an Aries.
Okay.
And so what would you want me to take from that?
Have you seen that meme? It's like this guy being like, Mom, what sign am I? And then the mom's like, run, not with her.
This is the sign.
Yeah. Or like, what time was I born? And she's like, run. Anyway.
And I have good friends who are like, according to the Chinese astrology, no. Or the Vedic astrology, no.
Yeah. I mean.
Not that one. Don't date that one. Now that I'm back in the dating scene.
Oh, we could talk about that.
Now it's the pairings.
Oh.
No. Let me just go on a few dates.
Yeah. Let me just meet someone at like anywhere, right? Like
right. Can I just meet them where they are?
Yeah.
Because don't you think that's the worst of identity?
Yeah.
Is to say Aries. Nope.
Yeah, for sure. It's so ridiculous. Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that's the tragedy of identity.
Stereotypes.
Because we identify, right?
Yeah, we didn't
even... Based on my perception, I didn't even give a chance to get to know the person or to meet them or to see them or to listen.
Totally.
Just immediately wrote it off based on how they identify or how I identify in that or those kinds of things. And I think that ultimately is kind of that unhealthy part that we're talking about. Like, I'm sure plenty of people have done that to me too.
Yeah, I remember when they would pit me and the other trainer I was brought up with.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh,
the comparison.
He was my trainer and he's better and she was my trainer. No, she's better. No, Marta's better.
Oh, well, mentor people.
Yeah.
Where people have enrolled them into it. I'm the mentor. Now I'm mentoring someone and the mentee is now delivering it. And they're like, I was told Krista would be the trainer.
Yeah.
Where's Krista?
Oh, I've had that happen too. And you're like, holy. Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
You're here for the trainer, not the training? Is that what's going on?
And on that note.
You're here for the Oprah?
Oh,
it's not Oprah.
I would totally be there for Oprah. I don't care what she says.
I don't care. I identify with Oprah.
Dude, I went to see Oprah at a Weight Watchers event. Like, do you think I cared
Did
about?
You really?
Yeah.
Is that her latest?
Right before the pandemic.
But isn't she doing that again?
No, I don't know if she's doing it again.
She's doing it again in the US.
Oh, well, I went to the one.
Big tour.
Right before they closed everything.
Oh, wow.
It was awesome. I took my mom. No, we went to LA. And it was the most amazing experience. 2020. It was Vision 2020.
Because people were asking, I don't know if we're still recording, but anyway, people were asking.
This could be bloopers.
How can you, Oprah, how can you support a Weight Watchers driven event about weight loss or obesity? How can you be an advocate of that?
Why not? She's been part of the company for so many years.
I understand that, but they were basically saying it's a diet. And don't you think that continues to reinforce the culture, diet culture?
Isn't everything like neutral? I mean, I guess, but she's struggled with her weight her whole life. So I think that's why.
Well, I think she responded really well about, is a Weight Watcher sponsored? Yes. Have I been an advocate for them for years? Yes, I have. But the topic and what we're covering and what we're talking about is not necessarily about the diet culture. It's literally about
the illness,
the healing obesity.
Because she's now speaking about the obesity as an illness.
Yep.
Yeah.
As a disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
You're
love
such
her.
an Oprah fan.
She can't do wrong by me.
Except for her humanness sometimes. She's like, isn't that a victim? Isn't that a victim conversation?
Sometimes
Oprah?
I'm like,
but she's just human.
It's because she went on Glennon Doyle, which I love that podcast. It's my favorite podcast.
Do you really?
I love it.
You love it?
I love it. I think her sister and her.
I might be identifying with you a little differently.
I think is so eloquent. Her sister speaks. I'm like, how did she? I love her. She's my favorite, then Glennon, then Abby. But her sister, I love.
Yeah.
She's
so
amazing.
Raw, so real, so articulate.
So articulate. Like, I
and doesn't
really
have to talk the whole time.
Articulate
she listens, and then,
Yeah. But anyway, last one. Gracias, comunidad linda, por estar aquí. Si crees que este episodio puede despertar, apoyar, inspirar, sostener a alguien de tu vida, no dudes en enviarlo. Te invito también a suscribirte al canal y a tocar la campanita para que te avisemos cuando haya un episodio nuevo. Gracias, linda comunidad. Y tengo un canal nuevo para ti. El canal de meditaciones está disponible en Spotify, Meditaciones by Marta Ro. Hay meditaciones para intencionar tu día, para que empieces con todo, de distintas temáticas, para empoderarte, para centrarte, para darte paciencia. Ve y búscalo y arranquemos tus mañanas juntos. Te amo. Adiós.